Hi, we are back with our third video. We are going to dive into Eric's addiction and what that began to look like as he started his use and progressed through his addiction. So,
I'm back
what
again.
we're back. When did Eric begin his use, or what were some of the early warning signs?
For when we started to recognize that it may be serious, he was in, I think, about like 11th grade, and we found alcohol, not beer, in his room. We started to notice he was hitting the hard liquor. I think we all go through, not say we all, but a lot of us look back at 11th, 12th, that grade, that we started to experiment with alcohol and drinking, so we knew he was drinking. You kind of look at it as a phase, but then when you start to see alcohol, empty bottles in his closet, and he was actually, when he would sleep, you could just smell the alcohol from his pores. That's how much alcohol that he had in him. That's when we realized we have a serious problem here. And one day, our oldest son, Keith, came to us and said, Eric had bruises on his arm, right where a needle would be injected. So we confronted him with that, and sure enough, he had bruises right in the area where you would inject. And of course, they always come up with a different excuse. We were horsing around, I got punched there or something like that. But that's where we, unfortunately, you look at it as a parent, as a phase that you went through drinking, and that they'll get through it. But you can't assume that that's what's going to happen. So that's when we knew it got serious.
Okay, so as the years progressed, or even early on, what kind of things did you guys try to do for Eric? What types of interventions did you guys use that maybe worked or did not work for him?
Well, first of all, as parents, you treat it as a behavior problem. So you do your, I'm going to ground you, I'm going to get mad at you, I'm going to shame you, and of course that doesn't work, because once addiction takes a hold of a person, there's a saying, addiction is stronger than love. So people get confused that, I'm trying to help them, but it doesn't seem to be working. So that hurt. I mean, I took things away from him. His guitar lessons, because he loved music, I stopped that. At one point, we sold his Grand Prix because of the actions that were going on. So those were all the wrong things, because we were treating it like you would treat any behavior problem, which addiction, you can't do that. And the one important thing that I learned is, you can't ask other people what to do who are not familiar with addiction. That's a big thing, is you have to seek the help from people who understand this disease. Substance use disorder changes the chemicals in the brain. So they're reacting to what they need. And that's where you can get as tough and push as hard as you want, but it's a battle you're more likely going to lose, and it's going to put stress on you too.
Did you guys try like facilities for any types of rehab or detox for him?
Yes, we sent him to Memphis in Michigan for like a 10-day rehab. We forced him into it. I think partly mistake, because they will look at that as a break, as a rest period, with no intent to quit their use. They want to stay in the house, so they will play along with you. And then, because Eric got out of there and he was back using within a matter of days. And we sent him out of state, and we sent him to a halfway house, thinking, not understanding the difference between halfway and rehab facilities and everything that they do. And that was in Maryland. and within 3 months when he came home, he was using again. So those were some of the mistakes we made, both the way we handled him and the facilities we went to, not understanding what was going on with him.
I'm sure there were many, many emotions that you and Marlene and your other kids faced when watching and enduring this addiction with Eric. What kind of feelings did you feel?
Oh, the family was in chaos.
Yeah.
And because Marlene and I really didn't understand addiction deep enough, we were always on different pages. And I can tell you, fathers and mothers, you handle it differently, I think, in a lot of cases. Where I was strict, discipline type wise, Marlene was more lenient. And a therapist told us, and this made perfect sense, is as I was getting stricter, Marlene was getting more lenient to counteract my strictness.
Okay.
And as I saw her being more lenient with Eric, I'm getting stricter to counteract her leniency. So what happens, you're pulling against each other instead of being together and agreeing what you need to do. So that was a mistake. And the kids were, Keith and Rachel were kind of fed up with what was going on. Keith spent a lot of time out of the house with his friends. He was older, so he would spend a lot of nights outside of the house. It's like they didn't understand addiction either. So they just see a sibling who's not behaving and causing problems in the household. So that creates a very difficult situation within the house, without a doubt. And Marlene and I fought quite a bit about how to handle it, and so it puts a strain on everybody beyond what you can think that you can do, handle.
With other, like, outside influences and relationships, did it bring about a feeling of shame or guilt for you guys?
Shame was big.
Yeah.
We only told a few people. Because of the stigma associated with it, you kind of view yourself that you failed as a parent. And so I let nobody on my side know at all. And you're worried about people who gossip, judgment, because there's a stigma about it. And now this was back 10 years ago, so it was even worse then than what it is right now. So we only told a few, and but yes, you try and hide everything. Like when he didn't show up for a family gathering, we gave a reason, or all that type of deal. So you're always trying to hide it from the other people, because you feel a lot of shame and guilt because of a family member going down that path.
Yeah, you, especially as a family who's never faced addiction,
That's a good point.
You don't know how to maybe respond. You don't have the knowledge quite yet, or the experience to know how to handle it.
And that was a major mistake for us. Not till we started to get recovery for us. We attended Al-Anon, and you start to learn to take care of yourself. And we also attended, because Eric went to Maple Grove, and he was in there for 14 days, and we took some classes there for the parents, and they educated us on what the disease is. And the one biggest thing a clinical person said, at first they used to get high, or whatever reason they're using, but after a point in time, after that addiction, whatever drug takes hold of you chemically in your brain, they're now using to feel normal. They're using to get through the day. And that kind of woke me up to, well, this is a lot different than what I thought it was. So it was very difficult.
I know Eric's addiction was over a span of several years, and I know that it's affected his relationships significantly. What areas in his life did addiction touch? How did it impact him in other ways?
I think at a point in time when Eric wanted to be clean, he felt his self-esteem was low, which a therapist told us that was going to go see. But for us over time, as we understood the disease, we created limits of what he had to do in order to stay in the house. So we started to put the guidelines together. And from there, when I started to understand the disease and he knew what we were dealing with, our relationship changed. We were respecting Eric as a person and not degrading him or shaming him in what he was doing. But we had to create boundaries, and that's a key thing. And you cannot enable what they're doing. You got to get out of that relationship with them. And one term is you detach with love, and detachment means you take emotionally yourself out of their world of chaos. And as a parent, you will have to do things you never dreamed of that you will have to do to your child. I mean, when we were in the battle early on, Eric couldn't live here. When you did allow him to live here, it's embarrassing, but we didn't let him sleep in the house. He had to sleep in the car in the garage. It was like a warm place for him, because we didn't know what he was going to take when he was in the house or what he would do, because he was trying to feed his addiction by either, stealing from us or taking something and selling it at a pawn shop. You just never knew, because they will go to extreme limits to feed their addiction.
Yeah, so it took a toll on his relationships, financially. Did it impact work at all?
For me?
For Eric.
For Eric, oh yeah, he got fired from a whole bunch of jobs.
Oh.
He couldn't hold a job.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them knew right away that they had a employee with a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So no, he had a very difficult time holding jobs, and it affected my job too.
Okay.
Going to work not knowing what was happening with Eric and everything else, because you don't know what path they're going to do, what they're going to do, waiting for a phone call, that type of deal. So I actually had to turn down a position that I was going to go into because I couldn't travel. I mean, it got to the point where I said, I can't. And this was before the recovery for me, where you're trying to control everything they do. And it's a battle that you will not win. And you cannot control people. You just set the limits of what they're allowed to do within your environment. So, yeah.
Sounds to me like you've learned quite a bit over these past several years. What are some of the most important things that you learned about yourself?
About myself, yeah, I had to. I'm a analytical person. I'm not a gut feeling person. In order for me to make major decisions, I need some feedback, okay? And I knew that. Marlene's emotional. She reacts to gut feeling. I react to information and data. But learning about myself, I learned I had to step back and look at the situation, have some compassion for Eric, knowing what he was going through. There's a term that I learned is, you didn't cause it, you can't control it, and you can't cure it. And these are thoughts from my Al-Anon that I went through. I mean, there's a lot in there about slogans, about one day at a time. Keep it very simple, keep it simple, but for the grace of God, you should be thankful it's not you going through what they're going through. But I learned a lot about me, of how to handle myself with the anger, because I had a lot of anger at the start. And I started to respect Eric, even though he may have been using and he wasn't living at home. I still picked up a phone call from him. Some people say cut every contact off. I'm not a believer in that, because they are dealing with a disease, and I don't think we never looked at it that way before. We thought it was a behavior problem, like I was saying, but when you look at it, what they're going through, they need help, but you create your boundaries too. So it's respectful, but you can respect them and treat them like a human being, but create boundaries for them so they understand behavior doesn't change unless consequences are felt.
Mm-hmm.
So, the best thing he said to me one day after recovery that we were going through and he was going through when things were good, he said to me, "You've changed." And to hear your son say that after the way I treated him, it felt pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For him to see the effort that you put into learning him and understanding him and where he was at, he felt that.
Oh yeah. When I understood what was going on with him and he understood what was going on with me, our relationship got much, much better.
Mm-hmm.
And even when he was in Florida having problems down there, we still communicated and got along, okay? But difficult.
Yeah, difficult. Yeah, no
Because-
matter where he's at.
Because you know what? You don't know what path they're going to go down. I remember one time we visited him and he was renting a room and all he had was a mattress on the floor, a 19-inch TV, and his duffel bag with his clothes. Well, when we visited him, he stayed with us and he washed his clothes and all that. So in Florida, a lot of the neighborhoods are gated, and it's not that they're super wealthy, it's just the way a lot of it is. So when we dropped him off after our visit, we had to drop him off at the gate, and he had to walk back to his house with a black trash bag with his clothes in it. And that was extremely difficult when we left because we had no idea how the next time would be when we saw him. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
That's impactful to hear that.
That's what I mean. You got to take steps that you never thought you would.
Mm-hmm. Addiction and this disease in a perfect world would come to an end. How do you think that we can either significantly reduce addiction or completely end it?
Oh boy, completely end it. That's you know, I'm a believer that the biggest impact will be demand. Stop the demand for the product. And you do that by education. I know a lot of people talk about, and this may be a conflict with some other views, but we have borders all around us. And stopping the drugs from coming in, you're going to stop a portion of those, but the drugs, there's too much money involved. They will figure out a way to get these drugs in. And I remember watching a program on TV where there was a tunnel from Mexico to the U.S. and the U.S. Blocked it, filled it up with cement, and they talked to a government official after that, and they said, "What do you think?" And he goes, "I could guarantee you they're building another tunnel right now, if not more." He says, "We need a culture change." And I'm in total agreement with him, is that we need to we need to educate people better. And I know they educate the kids in school. They have, people that come in. And back to my previous point, I'm an analytical person. I like to look at data. And the numbers have come down for the number of 12th graders, 10th graders, 8th graders who experiment with drugs, alcohol, vaping, and other things. So the percentages have dropped, but 12th graders experimenting in 2023 was still in the 40% range.
Wow.
And interesting fact is, of the people who suffer substance use disorder, 90% of them start before the age of 18. So that goes to show you the focus area that we need to do. But the other thing is the five main, now some of the main causes, and these are in the top 5. A person's genetics is the biggest reason, the number one factor about somebody falling into SUD, which people have to be aware of that. But some of the other factors was parental guidance, parental view on alcohol and drugs, and parental use of alcohol and drugs. So that tells me we need to put a stronger focus on educating parents. But the sad part is, I've talked to some people who are in the addiction area, and they told me it's very difficult to get parents to come in and get an education on what addiction is. So that's where I think we need to focus. Yes, do we have to limit drugs coming into the U.S.? But if you have a market for it, they will figure a way. They'll figure a new way to get it in, because there's just too much money. And we're not talking millions, we're probably talking billions with a B of drug trafficking. So if you stop the demand for it, that will definitely help. And I think you got to get the parents more involved.
Yeah, limiting access, education, understanding what can lead more to addiction, like you said, genetics and parent involvement. Those are all things that can lead to understanding addiction and hopefully ending it.
Agreed.
That's the main goal.
Somebody made the statement, if you didn't have the demand, maybe you wouldn't have so much of an issue fighting the drugs coming over the border. And to me, that makes some sense to me. So, yeah.
Are there other points that you would like to discuss before we end for today?
I think the main thing, I'm hoping that parents will start to get on board with educating. I recently been in touch with the church, and they are going to allow me to start a grief group for people who have lost a loved one to addiction, overdose, but they're also going to allow me to do a hour-and-a-half class, I want to say, to educate parents about this disease. And in that, I'm going to have a addiction counselor and an addiction therapist with me, so this way it helps spread the message more from a medical standpoint and not just my story. I'm hoping my story reaches them emotionally, and I think the two can give them the facts about addiction. So I hope that works out.
Yeah, you'll have to keep us updated so that we can get that out and people can maybe join.
I will.
Yeah.
I sure will.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys for joining us for video number 3. We are in the works of getting video number 4 all ready for you guys. If you guys have questions or comments, please let us know, and we will see you next time.
Thank you. Hello. I hope that last video showed you what it was like when a loved one is fighting substance use disorder, addiction. Our next video coming out in a couple weeks, we're going to talk to a therapist who is going to give some insight of how to handle the death of a loved one. So stay tuned.